master plan was devised in probably 2006, right around there. We were starting to see the growth affect our small town, coming west off of Hilton Head and moving its way into Bluffton. And Bluffton was just this small, somewhat of a square mile, but growing. So we decided to put some money and a lot of our efforts into what is called the Old Town Master Plan. It was adopted in 2006, and it really is a blueprint for all of our policies, improvements in our historic district. So the Garvin House is behind us. It is a historical structure. It's probably the last freedman's cottage that's on the river. So you look at it and people think, tear it down. Well, again, if you go back to this Old Town Master Plan, it would tell you, enhance your structures. Put your time and effort and your money into places that can't be duplicated.
My wife and I live here in Bluffton, and this has been a piece of property that we've looked at since about 2008, and before the restoration and renovation started, and something that we've been interested in seeing progress over time. Well, it's very interesting. The house has been called the Garvin House for just kind of folklore vernacular, and as Melanie Marks, my wife, went through the genealogy, it became clear that his real name was Cyrus Garvey, but through transfer of deeds and other the way people wrote things, that his name is actually Cyrus Garvey. But it took on Garvin, and at times you see Garvin, at times you see Garvey, but his real name, as you track back his family and so forth, is truly Cyrus Garvey.
You know, the history says that he built the house in 1870, shortly after, his freedom, on property that belonged to Joseph Baynard, who was a plantation owner. His summer home was here on this property, but his plantation was near or possibly in the bounds of Palmetto Bluff, the development. And somehow Cyrus was able to work this land, build his house in 1870, but didn't get deeded the property until 1880 by Joseph Baynard. When you think about this house and he was living here and the view that he had, it's amazing.
My wife and I got together and we said, we have to become part of this somehow. We have to come down here and spend time here and try and facilitate and bring more awareness to the fact that this is important. This is history, and how could we help?
Well, what brings us to Bluffton is this magnificent house here, the Garvin House. We've been working as director of the Palmetto Trust. I'm all over the state working with municipalities and communities, and this has been on our radar ever since I came on in 2007. And this was an amazing story of this family after freedom were able to build their own lives here in their own property. This is kind of a unique situation because most of the properties we work with do get turned into private homes. This is one where it really is going to be like a museum situation where the place is saved and the community can participate in learning about it, and the town can leverage it as part of their historic character that is so known in Bluffton so well.
Basically, when we took over this project, there was a stabilization project, which basically means where these 6x6s cribbing carries a steel beam that pretty much runs through the length of the house. So you've got one here, and you've got one pretty much that runs down the center. And this was basically to give support, because you can see the structure got to the point of where it really couldn't stand by itself. Now, this is new product, but what we've done is we were able to salvage all of the original flooring. So we basically removed it from the house, wrapped it up, documented it, numbered it so that it can go back down in the same place. And what we'll end up doing is painting the plywood floor black so that you can't see down through the cracks, and it gives the illusion of what it used to look like. We'll install as much of the original stuff as possible. Same thing with the siding. So you can see it's not too hard to pull down. It's almost completely off. But we'll take this down, photograph it, document it, and we put it back in the same place. This is some of the original old beam, and basically it's anywhere from 6 inches to 6.5 inches because it's all rough hewn. It was all done by axe and basically or hand saw, so it's not perfect. So it's got a little bit of a stam or a little bit of a wave here and there. So we've interlocked and tied it in. When we dug the footing, we came across a lot of interesting things. So just various bottles, little baby perfume bottles and things like that, just, that would be, precious to them back in the day. And these are some of the old original lids from the cannery, from the oyster factory. I kind of always enjoyed the challenge of looking at something and trying to look at, okay, why did they do this, or how did it develop into this, and how it progressed and changed. And just even standing here, you notice that this is exterior siding. So the original structure used to end here. That was the original back door, had a front porch on the front side. So as time progressed, they needed more room. They basically just notched in, added to the foundation, brought a new roof out, and now this became basically another room, bedroom, living room area, kind of a kitchen area here. And obviously you're not running down to Home Depot and Lowe's. You can see they actually just went down to the beach, got sand, and basically mixed a sand mortar, and you can see some of the oyster shell pieces in it and things like that. Just, that's amazing. What they would do is basically, because of the fact we've got a heavy-duty foundation like we have now, and this used to be basically what they would do is take a cypress stump, hopefully cypress because it would last longer, and this is 1870, but they would bury this into the ground, and then they would start all of their heavy beam and framing and basically sit on top of this. You have milestones every day. You think after, I've been doing it for close to 30 years, that, it's different every day and it's a challenge. So we have a staircase that was intact. So instead of having to remove it, we kind of kept it in place. We worked under it, around it, in it, and we temporarily secured this thing 8 different times while we put the floor system under it. This basically is our racks. So when we actually physically take something off the structure, we want to know where it is and what it went. So what we would do is we would physically remove it, photograph, and then we would go ahead and just label this piece, what side of the house it was on, where it was at, and it basically gives us a guide to put this giant puzzle, back together again.
This is a restoration. Most of the type of things that are done a renovation or rehabilitation that allows them to be modern use. We do have modern codes that had to be implemented here because of its public access, but every effort was made to try to ensure it communicated what these people had to build. So we didn't put in these big brick piers underneath that would have been normal. We just using wooden stumps. This is what they had. But everything is worked to give the aesthetic look of the type of house this thing would have been when it was built.
To capture a point in time, to capture what it would have been like. Again, this is a piece of a broader picture. To capture what a family, Cyrus Garvey was living in here with his wife and children in these reclaimed wood. At the time it was reclaimed, it could have been taken from houses that were burned after the war ended. And put this together where he lived, and then that's why the genealogy and the history of him and his family is so important, because it isn't just a building. It's a man and his family in a time of our history with a building and a community at a time of movement. And so you want to make it as real as possible.
It communicates a time and place that not many places do anymore. When in the low country where you have such development pressures, usually little wooden boxes like this get destroyed and lost. And so this communicates something post-Civil War, post-enslavement. It's about these people surviving and overcoming enslavement into a place of freedom and their niche in property and their own house. And that transitional story is not told enough in the state, and we're so glad it could be done here.
The biggest challenge, again, as you know, is working in all of the old lumbers and things like that. We're to the exciting part of it now. We're basically done with the framing. Now we're kind of putting the puzzle back together. You get a feel for when they actually put it together, and you can see their frustrations when they ran out of a particular species of lumber or something to use, and they just changed it up and still kept going and pushed forward. I knew the house would be here when we get back, just the methodical way that we put it back together. My biggest concern was these beautiful oak trees that have surrounded this. That was the scary part, because I did come down here 3 days after the storm, and there was trees and power lines down. I couldn't even see the house. I got down the road as far as I could and looked at the house, and I was like, oh my gosh, it just blew me away that the thing was still here, high and dry, no leaks, no nothing, no damage. And that was just, lucky, very lucky.
In November of this year, I presented the town with our finished report. I know the town is planning on using that material to promote the history of the house through brochures, through signage, to make it a true destination for tourists. I think we have to applaud the Bluffton Preservation Society for knowing the value and of the historic integrity of this house for the town.
In this community and in this country these days is a very important thing, because there's so much strife and there's so much conflict and friction. To actually have a community like this say, this is important. It's important to put our money here, and it's important to show how people over time did work together and respect each other, and we're resurrecting not only a house, but really a legacy for an individual that rose above a big challenging time.